So yeah, I guess I'll just start introducing ourselves whilst we're still waiting for some more people. So hello everyone, welcome to another CodeBase on the Couch. My name is Vanessa and I'm based up in Aberdeen in one CodeBase at the One Tech Hub. And joining with me today is Zoi Kantounatou. We
Hello.
had a conversation about how to pronounce it earlier on.
And you nailed it.
Thank you. So yeah, we're joined by Zoe today and we're going to be talking about kind of company culture and how important that is in 2020, right? We're all kind of working remote. So yeah, if you're not familiar with CodeBase, we are a tech cluster. We work with UK's startups everywhere and we kind of do mentoring. And we have the HQ in Edinburgh with our other locations in Stirling and Aberdeen. So basically the whole point of CodeBase on the Couch was to kind of keep the community connected during this really difficult time over a large range of topics that we've covered since beginning of time, April 2020. So yeah, we're joined by Zoe today. So hopefully we'll get to cover a bit more about company culture, which we haven't done so far. So as I said, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. So if you have any comments or questions or anything that you want to say, feel free to say it in the chat. We're all friends here, so there's no stupid questions. So yeah, what I'll do is I'll pass over to Zoe to start your presentation, if that's okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Vanessa. It's amazing to be here. I will start sharing my screen. You let me know whether something is not working. You see the background of it. Is that all good? Perfect. So thanks again. It's amazing to be here, and I'm really excited to be talking about a topic that is very, very close to my heart, which is how to create a company culture where people thrive. And especially talking about this topic in this year, 2020, when almost everything we do has completely changed unexpectedly. And as businesses, we need to adapt and do things differently than we ever had to do before. And it's a topic that sometimes we forget to pay attention to, but is one of the things that if we do correctly, it can actually help with our businesses scale and grow very quickly. So before I talk about company culture, I will give you a bit of background about myself so you know where I'm coming from and my perspectives and why this is a topic that I'm passionate about. So I grew up in Greece. And I studied finance in Greece, and during the time I was in finances studying, the crisis hit. And that gave me a bit of experience on what does it look like to go through a crisis, and so suddenly, and what the role of businesses is, and all the unexpected things about suddenly not having a future, being unemployed. So I moved from Greece to Scotland in 2011 to do a master's on socioeconomic development in Stirling. And I'm here since then. So it's been almost 10 years that I've been living in this beautiful country. I am a big, big believer that if you create a nurturing space, people will thrive. And that people have the potential and skills. And all we need to do as leaders is to unlock those skills through the spaces we create. And as we go on the presentation, for me, the space is both physical and online, is a space we create with people. And the other thing that I'm very passionate about is building better businesses. So I want to see a world where businesses take responsibility for their impact and for the way they solve the world's biggest problems. So I've been working with entrepreneurs for almost 8 years now. And in 2017, I co-founded FutureX, a company who is on a mission to empower the purposeful, to enable them to create impact at scale using business as a force for good. So we help businesses, all kinds of businesses, we help them to get all the tools they need to grow and scale, and at the same time have a positive impact in the world. And we do that through our events. We have our Startup Summit coming up in 3 weeks' time at the end of October. But we also do that through our community of entrepreneurs, FutureX Plus, which we launched in February 2020. It feels so far away. So that's a bit about me and background, but let's now talk about company culture. So a theme that has been very important for years now, it's been in the conversations. And for a long time when we're talking about company culture, we're talking a lot about the physical space. And that was what our offices look like when we come together, creating the space for people to brainstorm, having the ability to stay for drinks later, like free coffee. I'm privileged enough to go to Silicon Valley every year for the program we run, and I see all the different companies' cultures they have there with like free breakfast, and the first picture is from Facebook and having everything there. But 2020 has changed all this because we were all forced quite quickly to move online and work from home. And even the people who go from the office have a completely different experience of what the office looks like than they used to be before. And for me, this is a very exciting opportunity to start talking about company culture for what I really believe it is, which is more than the physical space. The physical space is an expression of it, but actually for me, company culture is the way your employees feel by being part of your business. So they could feel happy, engaged, motivated, empowered, that they want this to thrive and succeed, or they could feel exactly the opposite. They could feel undermined, they could feel unhappy, demotivated, that this is just a paycheck in the end of the day. They just come in, do some work, and they want the money in the end. And exactly because it's a feeling, it means that we need to do a lot of things to make sure that they feel the things we want them to feel. And the exciting opportunity is that you don't need a space to do this, a physical space. You can do that online. But the thing that is important is that it's quite difficult and it's quite long-term, because a company culture takes nurturing, and it's very easy for it to go wrong. So I have 4 things that I believe are the fundamentals of a company culture. And a company culture that is human-centric, and a company culture that allows people to thrive. And as Craig said, a company culture that employees can take ownership of. So the first one is mission. People want to be part of something bigger, and they will put effort and time in something they believe in. And by that, I mean any kind of mission that companies have. It doesn't always have to be, oh, we're going to change the world. Is they believe in the success of what you're trying to achieve. They believe in the world your company tries to create. And by having that, they will always try to do their best to see that happening. The second one is trust. When people feel trusted and they also trust you, are more likely to take initiatives and create innovation and bring ideas to the table. And that is because they feel they have ownership of their ideas. They're trusted to fail, they're trusted to bring ideas, they're trusted to say their opinions, but also they trust you and the decisions you're making. They know that you're making the best decisions possible, or at least you're trying to. They trust your intentions, they trust your ability to do things, and they feel that they can actually add things to this rather than constantly being questioned. There's a lot of conversation these days about online surveillance and trying to check what people are doing and whether they're doing it. But actually giving people the ownership of, I trust you to do your best work, gives people the freedom to just do that. The next one is human connections. We are social animals. We want to be around humans. We want to build these connections. We want to have this humanity. And especially now that we're not all together in the same office, that becomes even more important. And people are alone more than they work. So they want to be accepted and appreciated as humans. I don't suggest becoming best friends with your team. I don't do that. I actually done that in the past and had a bad experience because of this. But my suggestion is, think about your team as humans. They have bad days. They have challenges that they face at home. They have things that they worry them about the situation of the world right now, about their families. They have good days that they come in and they're so excited and they want to share. So create the space for these conversations to happen. Even if it's simple, I have a very bad day today. So I might be quite abrupt. I might not be as engaged as I was yesterday. I say, okay, that's fine. I understand. Take the time you need. Or how can I help you? What can I do? Do you want us to move this meeting to tomorrow when you feel more productive? Do you want to leave you alone and you kind of like focus on something else? But make sure that people have the space to bring that side of themselves that can easily say, yes, I'm having a bad day today. And the last fundamental is security. We all as humans need security, and you need to feel secure that in our job environment, in every environment. In companies and startups, especially in the world we live in right now, security of like job security might not be what it is, because you know that any company can fail at any point, or not even, I don't like the word fail, but things can change, and we've seen that. But there are other ways we can create security. And you can create security by people knowing their boundaries and knowing what is expected of them. So what is expected to me in my role? How can I know that if I do everything I need to do, I'll get praise? How I know that what are the things they don't want me to do? For example, in our company, we have a culture of no excuses. When something is not going well, I don't like to hear excuses. I don't want someone to come in and say, yeah, we didn't have a lot of time, or we didn't realize that, or things happen. What I want to know is what we've learned. And this for me brings security, because people know that the expectation is don't come up with excuses. I don't mind that it didn't work. What I want you to do is to come in and tell me, this is what I've learned from this. This is how we're going to do it next time. So big notions, big ideas, mission, trust, human connection, security. How can we build those things? A couple of things. Clear vision and direction. I talked about mission before, and that helps build both this mission understanding and the security. When people know where they're going towards, where the business is going towards. Sometimes as leaders, we change direction slightly, or we adapt to the market, to adapt to where things are, and we forget to let our teams know. Or we think they're on board, but they're not. Because they're so focused on the day-to-day stuff, they're so focused on dealing with problems that they forget what the big picture is, when the big vision is. So making sure that the vision is clear, but also you take the time to tell your team and engage your team with that, ask their ideas, remind them, this is where we're going, this is what we've done up to now, celebrate the successes, and talk about how you're going to get there together. The second one, which is very important for me, is lead by example. This is how you can build trust. When people know that you're not asking of them something that you wouldn't do yourself. That applies for jobs. When you do something and you do a task, you ask them to do a task that you wouldn't do, and suddenly they feel this is a task that is not important, or there is a reason why you don't want to do it. But it also goes with setting the company culture. If you want a company culture that people have flexible working and they have good work-life balance, they shouldn't see you working all morning and all evening and in the weekends. If you want them to be able to fail and make mistakes, they need to see you making mistakes. If you want them to be able to bring the whole selves in the business and say, oh, I had a bad day, they need to see you having a bad day and how you react to this. Next one is listen. Listening is important, and listen not just to answer and resolve, but understand. Recently we had a situation in the business when my team came and said something that I fundamentally disagree with. And that was our approach, my approach in a particular thing. And I thought they're wrong. And my automatic reaction was like, I don't want to listen to this, they're just wrong. And then I realized that actually it doesn't matter, because this is what they feel and this is their version of the truth. So by listening to them and understanding what they're saying, I was able to take a step back and say, yes, this is not what I wanted them to think, but the fact that they think that thing means that I've done something wrong in communicating that. So it's not always about fixing it. It's about understanding what they really mean with what they're saying. Be open to feedback. When people come and say, this is not working, be open to that and say, okay, cool. Yeah, we'll try something else. Or, okay, what would work? What do you want to work? That can also create a feeling for them to be open to feedback, because it's going back to lead by example. If you're open for feedback and if you're open to change, they will do the same thing. Focus on quality, not quantity. I was saying before to Vanessa, we are doing a 4-day working week. We've been doing this for 5-6 years now. And for me, it has been a fascinating experiment to do when it started, because the whole idea behind it is that we focus on the jobs being done, high quality of work, and meeting the deadlines. I don't care how many hours you work to do that. I always pay attention when people work more than I think they should, because that's an indication of something not going very well. But if you can do the same work in 4 hours because you're more productive, why would you spend 7 hours on it? And if you know that you know something, I can leave after 3 hours and go enjoy the sunshine because it's happened once in Scotland. Why not? Why would you be in the office just to prove me that you're in the office? And what I've seen is people doing a lot more and bringing better work into this. And they become quite, they've taken a lot of ownership of that. Like they would come and say, I've done my work, bye. Like they feel that. So it's exciting to see. My next 5, be transparent. That is important also to being trust and security. Because people want to know that if they ask you something, you're going to tell them the truth. And that's what brings security. Because sometimes when you're not feeling secure, it's because you feel like you have all these ideas. What if we're failing? What if the business will collapse in like 2 weeks and I won't have a job? And that creates this feeling of, I'll just try to find a job. So be open and transparent. If they come and ask, how is the business going? Find a way to reply to that. I'm not saying tell them everything because people don't want to know everything. My experience by doing that all these years is that people are asking me only the things they really want to know. They're not asking the difficult questions that they don't want to know the answer to because they know that probably I will tell them. So they take an ownership of the information they want to handle. Look out for assumptions. That is, for me, a fundamental one because assumptions are the things that lead us to judgment. And for me, assumption is the basis of miscommunication. So sometimes we would assume that, oh, they're not performing or they are not producing the results we're producing. And you attach something to that. They're not good for this job or they're slacking behind or anything. By understanding these assumptions, you can make sure that you solve the actual problem, not the symptom. So you can understand, is the process that is confusing? Is it that they don't have the skills and they need training? Is it that the expectations are not clear? Do they need, are they trying to please me by doing something that I never wanted them to do? And that happens with everything. By look out for assumptions, you can make sure that you create a culture where people can actually understand each other and say the things that they really mean. Allow mistakes. I don't like the sentence, create a space where people can fail because I don't like the notion of failing. As humans, we learn by doing things and by trying things out and by making mistakes. And that's what we do as kids. And as adults, we forget that. We suddenly get into this feeling of, I can't fail anymore. And by creating a space where people can make mistakes, then that's what they're going to bring the best ideas forward. And for me, it comes back to what I was saying before about how we're going to learn that. So when someone is making a mistake, don't ignore that. It's not about, okay, they made a mistake. It's about, okay, that was a mistake. What can we learn from this? How are we going to approach it next time? What can we be doing differently? And this is where more ideas will come into action. And last one would be embrace diversity. Diversity in a lot of different things. My big belief is that we're all diverse because no human being has exactly the same life experience like anyone else. So use that for your benefit. Embrace that. Embrace different perspectives, different cultures, different mentalities, people coming from different places in the world. Because this is your power, this is your value. Because this is how, by embracing that, people will not feel afraid to say their opinion just because it's not the same like everyone else's. And this is how innovation will happen. Because all you need is one person to say, I don't agree with this. I think there is a better way to solve this problem. But if they don't feel that this diversity is embraced, they probably don't say anything. There are some tools you can use. There are a lot more than these. I'm just giving an example of 3, and we can talk about that in the Q&A if you have more specific questions. The first one is surveys. I know that is something that we feel like we do. I personally, sometimes when people told me you can do a survey, I was like, oh, it's another thing to do, another process, or I have such a small team that I probably know what everyone thinks, like I don't need to do a survey. But the power of surveys, especially where they're anonymous, is that they can give you a progression of time in a situation. As businesses, we make decisions, data-driven decisions all the time. Sales targets and financial targets and deadlines. But this is also an opportunity to make some data-driven decisions based on that. So an anonymous survey, you can actually ask people, how are you feeling in terms, are you motivated, 1 to 5? Do you think you have clarity on your mission? Anything you want to, and do that quite often. Do that once a month, because then you can suddenly understand what other factors affected that. So one day everyone could be motivated, and then next month suddenly they're not, and you're like, okay, what happened there? And maybe it's like, you know something, it's the 6th month we're working from home and suddenly I realize that I'm not going to see my colleagues again. Okay, what can you do to change that? So you get very valuable data from this. The second one is check-ins with your team. I do one-to-ones. I prefer it that way because you create a space with each person. I understand that in bigger teams that might not be possible. But we do that every month. And for me, it creates 2 opportunities. The one is for people to bring issues to the table. One of the questions is like, what challenges are you facing right now? And they bring the problems. I'm facing this challenge. This process is confusing. I feel that I don't understand what my role is supposed to be. I don't understand who I need to be reporting to, all these different things. And you can also bring issues to the table. You can say, I've noticed you're not performing the past month. What's going on? How can we help you? And by doing that every month, you know that they're not things that are bottled up and 6 months later someone leaves because you're like, you know something, it's been 6 months that I have no idea what my role is and it was never resolved because you have created this dedicated space for that. And for me, the other outcome of this is that you show to people that you're open to listen. And what will happen is that people suddenly will come to you and take ownership of that and will come to you and say, you know, I don't understand this process. That affects me. I have this challenge right now and I don't want to wait until the next check-in to tell you because I know you're there for me. And the last tool you can use for me is flexibility. You can decide what flexibility means in your business. I said we're doing a 4-day working week. We have an unlimited number of holidays and we see how that goes. We don't have set hours of a day when people are working, but that's not it. That's not for every business. There are businesses when people need to be there every day for a particular reason. It's not a cure for everything. But flexibility is something that most of people want right now. They want flexibility with work-life balance. They could want flexibility with the way they choose projects or flexibility with the way they approach a solution. So try to understand which parts of the business you can become more flexible and try things out. Don't be afraid to say, we're going to try this for a month. And if it doesn't work, we're going to go back to what we had before. Company culture is a very important thing. I know that everything I said might sound generic, and I know that, you know, even being honest and listen is kind of like difficult things to do. And I know that a lot of people, including myself, sometimes I want something very practical of like, do this and it work. And with company culture, it's not so easy to do exactly because it's a notion that is quite high level, but it's very rewarding. Because if you build a very good company culture, people will take ownership of this and they will take your business to the next level. And I'll leave you with this quote from Oprah, who says, there's no paycheck that can equal the feeling of contentment that comes from being the person you're meant to be. And if you can create this environment for your team, then they will stay there and make sure that your business thrives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoe. A virtual round of applause for Zoe. That was a really great presentation. That was really well structured and very informative. So thank you so much for that. I can see that we've had a few new people join. So if you have any questions or comments about Zoe's presentation, please pop them down below. We've got a Q&A session now until 2 o'clock now. So we've got plenty of time. If you have any questions you want to ask, if you want Zoe to kind of build more on what she said, then yeah, feel free to ask away. There's no stupid question.
Never.
I say. Oh, we already have a question from through. It was quick. It's from Craig. He says, if your business does not start with a mission or culture, is it possible to create that later? And how should it be done? Should it come from the top or should it be something that's created with your team? That's a really good question.
Yes, very, very good question. It is, yes, it is very possible to create it later. This is not like you didn't do it from the start, you can't do it again. Definitely. I would say it's something you need to create with your team, especially because it's said that, you know, when you have a small business, it's around the 30th person that the newest addition will affect your company culture. Because when you have a small team, everyone brings their own mentalities, their own perceptions, their own things. So they kind of like slightly change the company culture. So say for me as a leader, do some thinking about what you want this company culture to be like. What are the fundamentals? You don't want judgment. You don't want excuses, as I don't. There's some things that you feel as a leader are the things that you want to see in the business. And then work with your team to understand exactly how that will go. I would suggest spend a day and talk about that. talk about what they want and how they can see the roles changing into that. They can come up with ideas themselves. And sometimes you see that people safeguard that. And I had people like from my team come in and say, this is not our company culture. And this is the moment you're going to be like, okay, we've created something that is a bit bigger than that. So yes, you can create it. And I would say do that with your team. It's not something you should do alone.
Great, thank you so much. Hopefully that's answered your question, Craig. If not, feel free to pop another one in. We've got a question coming from Barry. Hello, Barry. Thank you, that was very interesting. How do you maintain a healthy company culture over a long period of time? Do you have regular health checkups? And should one person in the organization be responsible for maintaining the culture?
Very interesting. Yes, I would say regular health catch-ups are very good. I think that's part of the service you can do, but also you can do with the check-in one-to-ones. I think for me, like making sure that you maintain a health company culture for a long period of time is part of being in your mind that this is something that needs to stay. It's very easy to get caught up with other things, especially as a founder or a leader, and then suddenly you realize that you hadn't paid attention to that. So having regular conversations about this and making sure that people are still on board with that, they're still interested, they can express their problems. I think for me, it's both sides. You can also create the space for people to come to you every time they feel that the company culture is not what they wanted. In terms of one person of the organization being responsible for maintaining the culture, I would say it would be nice to have someone that they're focused on that, so you know that it's not forgotten, especially if you know that this is not something you can do, because then you know that it's easier for you to understand those things. I wouldn't say responsible. I would probably say like safeguarding, because I think it's for everyone's responsibility to maintain the company culture. And by taking that responsibility only to one person, it's easy for other people to kind of like feel it's not my job. Someone else will have to fix it. Someone else will have to come. And even for yourself feeling that way. So having someone to safeguard that, and their job is to focus and constantly be aware and know what's happening 100%, but maybe the responsibility can lie with everyone.
That's really interesting. I think it's really important, because I think people do tend to feel a certain sense of responsibility, especially employees, when they see that management might not be certainly keeping on top of it. So I think that's really interesting. That is kind of everyone has to feel a sense of responsibility. So yeah, hopefully that's answered your question. If not, pop another one below. I'm kind of going back to what Craig was saying earlier about building that company culture. I mean, what happens if you've got a team that hasn't really got much of a company culture? Like, how long can that kind of last before you're like, okay, we need to build a company culture now? And by then it's probably too late, right? Like, there's too many bad habits that's been built. And kind of what do you think about that? Kind of your opinion.
It is quite tricky, and it's definitely something very difficult to do. For me, company culture is something that is so fundamental that it can also show you, it affects everything in your business. And how long does it take? It can take forever. Yes, when there are bad habits happening, I think it takes a bit more effort to make sure that you go to the right direction. So if you work with your team, you sit down with your team, you work, and you say, this is the company culture we want. And that's why it's important to bring them on board to this conversation. Because if you decide on that remotely and then tell them, this is it, they're like, oh, this is not what I've been doing up to now. Suddenly I don't like it. When you create this, you sit with your team, you create a company culture, I would say be prepared that there might be people who leave. Because we might say, you know, you haven't created a company culture. Company culture is created either way, because people create this culture. So when we say you haven't created a company culture, it's the culture that you wanted intentionally. There is a culture, and there is a culture that is within the company, which means that people are already happy with that. And it could be a culture where, you know, you have specific people who feel like, oh, I have the power now, I can undermine other people. And this is the things that you don't like. If that's what they want, when you change this culture, they won't like it. So be prepared that people will leave. But that is a good thing, because that can create this mentality that this is who we are as a company. It is interesting too. I was doing a certification on coaching teams. And it was interesting because one of the things I was saying is that when you have people who are not performing in a team, you have to understand, you have to look for two things. One is, do they have the skills? And the second thing is, are they a cultural fit? And what I was saying is that if they're not a cultural fit, you need to let them go, because they will never thrive in your business, even if they have the skills, because it would never change. If they are a cultural fit and they don't have the skills, this is when you need to invest in them. So you either invest in training to get the skills, or you try to find another role within the business that can actually utilize their skills better, and it's something that can help you. But for me, this shows how important a company culture is. And us as leaders understanding that if we change the company culture, we have to accept that people might leave. And actually, this is a good thing, because these are not the people you want there, because they would never allow you to create the company culture you want.
I think that's really interesting. Do you think that a particular employee might have the skills, like a cultural fit in some respect, but due to the company culture that they do have, or management, I kind of see that kind of maybe intertwined slightly. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like then, like, it directly affects the employee's motivation to work, their standard of work, their quality of work? Kind of what are your opinions on that?
Yes, 100%. And I think that is exactly why it's important. Yes, it's kind of like what you're saying. For me, company culture and management are quite linked. Exactly, because for me, it's important to lead by example. So leadership comes, like, if you want a company culture, it has to filter through your leadership. So you can't say that, oh, I want a culture where everyone feels like they can thrive, and doing the other side, the opposite when you're managing someone, but being like, you're not performing, you're making mistakes, this is not right, you can't do it, or I'm going to do your work for you because it wasn't good enough. Like, I used to work in companies that I had a boss when they were like, oh, I want you, you're so good, you're amazing. And then every time I would produce something, they were like, yeah, I'll just change it completely. And you're like, but they don't trust me. They don't trust my ability to do things. So definitely 100%. I believe that everyone brings different things, and that's from past experiences, past like company cultures. So what you need to be aware is that it might not be one thing you do for everyone, but understanding how each person might find it difficult. You have people that have a fear of voicing their opinion. So for them, you need to make sure that you hold the space when you have group meetings that they're actually allowed to say their opinion, or you ask their opinion in a different environment. So sometimes as a leader, you have to adjust to make sure that happens, exactly because people might feel that, you know, there is a culture that not everyone speaks at meetings, so I will never say my opinion, which means I'm never motivated. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. I think I definitely see, like I said, the company culture and management kind of like intertwining, being kind of related to each other. Having good leadership, having, like you said, leading by example is really important. But I have seen in the past where, you know, managers have been treating people differently due to, like, I don't know, seniority of roles, for example, and then turning their back and saying different things to different people. So I think that's quite important, is kind of leading by example, it kind of coming from the top and kind of trickling down through the organization. So yeah, I think that's that has answered my question. Yes.
Yes, and kind of like adding to that also as leaders, and this is for me the important of like being open for feedback, is that you're not going to get everything right. Like, it's a massive responsibility to think that all the time you respond with the right thing, and all the time you'll be able to not do this, especially when you have 100 million things happening in your brain at the same time with everything else. So it is fundamental for you to also have the humility to actually say, yes, that was an oversight, that was a mistake. Like, you know, you felt undermined at that meeting. Like, sometimes I do that. Like, I have meetings and I know it's someone else's meeting, and I take ownership of that, because at that moment I'm like, we need results right now. I just run the meeting. And then I sit back and I was like, oh no, but this is not who we are. So I actually call the person. It's like, I'm sorry that I took over the meeting for you. It wasn't right for me to do so. And we were able to have a conversation, because you're going to make mistakes, but people will enjoy that. They will appreciate you being like, I recognize it. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't that this is the company culture. Is that I made a mistake because I'm human like everyone else.
Yeah. We have had a question come through. Says, you mentioned security as a key aspect of culture. In these strange times where many small businesses are struggling, do you have extra tips for managing employee trust?
Yes. Very good question. It is very difficult in these times. And I think exactly that, like, as I said, especially with businesses right now, no one is secure for any reason. Well, I have no idea what happens tomorrow. For me, the tip would be to have these difficult conversations, but also to find ways you can manage that. For example, we have a lot of people who are like, okay, we gave our office up last week, we emptied the office. And it's like, what's happening now? What are we going to do? Are we going to work from home all the time? I don't know. Like, I don't like that. How can I feel secure? Like, I'm not feeling that way. Like, I don't trust that. And all you can do is actually say, you know what? This is the plan when we're able to execute it. So we don't know. The rules haven't changed. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. I have no idea, but these are the steps we're taking. This is what we're going to do. The moment we can go back, we're going to do this. So sometimes it's be able to share that you have a plan if everything goes the way it goes, because you can't control the way it goes. So in these difficult times, I would say listen to what their worries them, what kind of like concerns them, and find ways to set a plan, knowing that, you know, that plan might not happen, not in a fake way, but in a way that you don't know if everything will fall the way you want it to fall. But be open. This is what happens if all goes that way. That's all I can do. And I think people will understand that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's definitely true. But I think at the same time, there's striking that perfect balance, though, isn't it, of like being transparent and being open with your employees, but then also kind of you know, you don't want to give them too much security, because then when it all goes Pete Tong, like, you know,
Definitely.
you're back to square one. So yeah.
But I think that's it. And it's kind of like just saying, you know, something, it is with difficult times. Like I had this conversation recently. There's like, how's the business going? It's like, it's difficult times. Like, you know, of course it's difficult times. It's difficult times for everyone. This is the steps we're taking. This is what we're doing. This is the opportunities we can see. That's kind of like, it's like, okay, yes, you're not going to solve the problem, everything, because of course, like you can't, like we're still working from home. No one knows. But at the same time, you give them this feeling that, you know, they have thought about this, and that brings security. Knowing that someone actually has thought about this. It's not like you say, when are we going to back to the office? And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, who?
Yeah.
They don't know what's going to happen. If you ask you, how's the business going? And you're like, oh, it's difficult. And what are we going to do? Like, I don't know. This brings this feeling of like, I'm not secure here because no one has thought of anything.
Mm-hmm. I think even just like you said, coming up with a plan provides them with a little bit of comfort as well. Like, you know, like you said, we don't know what's happening. Every day is changing. You know, we're moving at a really fast rate at the moment. So, I mean, just saying that you have a plan, that you have even thought about it, I think gives them security that it is something that senior people, management are thinking about as well. So I think that's really important. So yeah. Hopefully that's answered your question. If not, pop another one in. Got another question. How do you communicate your company culture externally to potential employees? That's really interesting. So many companies have a team and culture page on their website these days, but as someone who's looking for a job, how can I make sure that it's not just culture washing?
Very, very interesting question. I would agree, because I feel that there's so many things you see. This is our company culture. And everyone's like, yeah, okay. And then as you see it everywhere. And I was like, yeah, everyone has a great intention. So why not? Every company has a great company culture. Why there's still conversations about that? Why they're still happening? I would say there is an element of you to say those things in the job description. So it's not only the website, it's not that they can see that. But for me, everything starts with the interview. In both ways. There was someone was saying to me recently, and I thought that was such an important thing. It was like, if you want to have a diverse company culture, you need to have a diverse interview panel, because when new people arrive, they need to see that there is space for them. It's not about you telling them, oh, I have a diverse company culture. It's about them seeing that and being like, yes. You can get them to spend a day with you at the office when they come for an interview, so they can speak with other people. They can see how things are, not just by you telling them. And for me, it's important for them to be able, like, when you ask, do you have any questions as a panelist, like as in the interview, is to ask questions about the culture. Do you have any questions about our culture? How do you think you can fit in our culture? Like, explain, not expect them to have the perfect answer, but make sure that they understand what it is and they have ways to answer that. I think one of the best interviews we had with someone, when they asked, how is your company culture like embodied in your leadership style? I was like, that is a brilliant question, because you know that this person, if they come, they know, they understand it. So not only the website, you can have it on the website. I'm not saying not putting it on the website, but I think people are a bit more skeptical about words, so they want to see actions. So trying to understand in the process of you getting someone from the job description, the way you word it, everything, like if you like the way you word your job description shows a lot about your company culture. Whether you're inclusive or not, whether you like diversity or not, whether you have flexibility or not. I recently was looking at the job description. They were saying, we will try everything to do to make sure that you have flexibility for any reason. Either that is another project or just work-life balance. And that's on the job description. You're like, okay, that's interesting. You know that you can ask for that. But also when they physically come to your office, when they physically meet you, even on Skype, like on Zoom, like anything you do to make sure that you embody this culture. So it's something they actually visibly see.
I think that's really, really interesting to hear that, because I guess when you go for an interview, you're not only the one being interviewed, you're interviewing your potential, you know, company as well. Like you have to ask those questions too. And if it does trip them up, it's just like, well, good, that's supposed to. I mean, you're getting tripped up yourself. So I think that's really important. I think a lot of people think interviews are very one way. You know, I'm getting interviewed for a job. It's like, well, are you not then also interviewing a company? Because you're going to be spending X amount of hours of your life there. Like you need to make sure that it's a company that you're going to go for. It matches you as a person as well, not just like you just need a job, you know. I think that's really important. So yeah, I agree with everything you said.
Brilliant.
Another question, are there businesses you admire for their great company culture?
Oh, I've been very strategic about that. I will probably say no. And the reason I will say no is not because there are no companies that I admire parts of the company culture, is because I haven't worked for any company that outside mine to know exactly their company culture. So it goes back to what we're saying about website and how that is promoted and how that I have this belief that, you know, what we see in the world is not always what happens. And I know the opposite. I know companies that I think they had great company culture, and in action that wasn't the case. There are things I admire in parts of companies' culture that I admire in a lot of companies. And I think that's what I'm always trying to take away. For example, I know that Apple, one of the things that I've learned recently that Apple is doing, which I didn't know in terms of the company culture, is that if you go to a meeting in Apple, no one knows each other's job title, sorry. And that is because the fundamental belief is that if you're invited in this meeting, it's because you have something to say. So it doesn't matter the levels of seniority. It doesn't matter whether this is the CEO or this is kind of like the intern that came through. The invitation itself means that you have something to add to this particular meeting. And I thought that was brilliant. But I don't know whether the rest of the company culture is what I would agree with. So kind of like strange way to answer that. There's things that I admire like this, and I was like, I want to do that in my own company when it grows and we can do this, but I don't have a particular, this is the company that I admire, this is the company culture that it should be.
I think for companies it's really hard to kind of strike that balance, isn't it? Like for them, creating a great company culture is having beanbags and having like a pool table and having free coffee and free lunches every week. Like I think they think that's what great company culture is, and as long as they provide those physical things, then they don't need to think about it anymore. So yeah, I think it's I think having those kind of like little things really does make a massive difference in kind of workplace culture, I guess. So
yes, and I think that's it. So for example, in Facebook, they have exactly what you're saying, that there's a massive campus, everything is for free. The whole idea is that if you go there, you have no reason to leave ever. Everything, like you hand everything for free. And for me, that's kind of like something like, okay, yes, it's fun. You do it one day, but like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want to spend all my day at work. But at the same time, so I don't agree with this, but one part they have that I actually like is that they have flexibility in the job you do. So if you come up with a project that you want to do and you like this idea, you can go and speak to a few people. And if they agree, you create a group and you go to your boss, like your manager, and say, I want to work on this for the next 6 months. And they're like, yeah, sure. So you have ownership of your ideas and the work you do, which I actually think is a very smart thing to do to foster innovation. So it depends on kind of like every company can choose which one they do, physical or things like that. So for me, there's specific parts that are like, they're amazing. And there's specific parts I'm like, I don't think this is necessary, or this is what makes the biggest difference.
So we've got one comment. To what extent do you think a company culture applies to customers you work with as well?
I do think that, yeah, it's very important. And it's a tricky one because you can't always choose your customers based on the company culture, but it's definitely something that makes your life easier if they are aligned, and makes the work better and makes your employees more engaged. And I've seen that in action. We had projects when we were working with organizations that they didn't share our company culture, and they were the most difficult projects to run. Because, when you have a company culture, the way we do that, we try no one to be undermined, no matter what their position is. And suddenly they're speaking with someone externally, they're undermining them. It's very difficult because your team is not trained for that. They don't enjoy that. So they're not motivated to do the work. So if you can choose your company, your customers that are aligned with the company culture, that will make your life a lot easier. As businesses, and small businesses in particular, if you are, it's quite difficult to do. Because sometimes you just need the client, you just need the money, you just need this work, or the work itself is really good for you. It's just that the company is not. I would say that if you're in a position to be able to have a conversation about that with a potential customer, that also helps. You can have a meeting and say, we're taking this work. This is how we work as a company. This is our company culture. This is part of how we're going to deliver this particular project, or we're going to do that. So it is an element of, if you want, you can bring it to the conversation and make sure that that becomes part of the fundamentals. So then you can always bring that back to this and say, something, that meeting was a bit uncomfortable because it's not how we do things here. So can we find another way to communicate, for example?
Have you ever experienced somewhere where the company has, externally appeared to be, fun and they've got a great company culture, but internally there are like lots of problems that you found out after the fact? Or
yes. The answer is yes. Obviously I can't say things, but it's not that I will ever do. And obviously because that's also in my personal opinion in terms of what I like and I don't like. But yes, 100% I've experienced that. Of companies that they're like outside, they were actually promoting this and this kind of like, this is what we do. And then I found out stories later that was actually quite more like a bit different than that in terms of how they actually behave and things. I'm always a bit skeptical because I know as a leader and a founder how difficult it is to always make the right decision. So I never want to judge people on that. Like, this is what I've heard and what I saw, but you never know whether that was one example. You never know whether that was just a mistake, like mistakes happen. But for me, that was, yes, the answer is simple. I've seen that happening before. Yeah. And I hope that this is like a mistake and it will change.
I think it's just really, have you ever called them out on it? Have you spoken to them, or has it just been like, what was your kind of resolution to that?
Not in particular. I don't think I did. I didn't know them that well to know, I think. And this is kind of like what's interesting for me because, sometimes you get things exactly because like you get them from friends. Like that was just a close friend working from somewhere that I knew, like the thing that I have seen about the company was something completely different. When then she told me what was happening, I was like, oh, that's not what I thought it was happening. But it wasn't like I knew them that well to be able to go and say, something, why did that happen? So no, but I do know it's happening.
Yeah, I guess that just happens everywhere. I think it's just one of those things. You can't really catch them or do anything about it if you're not too close. But cool. We've got another question. You talked about Facebook and Apple based in the US. You are and working in the UK. Can you share your thoughts about the impact of national culture on company culture?
Ooh.
That's a great question.
It's a very good question and a difficult question. I'm glad that how this is progressing. Very big impact, I would say. I speak for myself, and I think that's kind of like the only thing I can do, especially when it comes to national culture, because that's what I know. For me, it was interesting because I struggled with that. Exactly because like I brought things from my culture here, of course, the way I do things. And I struggled because they were not accepted. That was earlier in my career when I was working, I was an employee, and they're not always accepted as what they are. And the main thing for me was, as Greek, I was quite more, what's the word, quite abrupt, quite straightforward. And Europeans are a bit more like that. I think British people are a bit more about like trying to be a bit more nice and kind and like say things, and it creates confusion both ways when they tell you, yeah, that's kind of interesting, and you're like, yes, they liked it, and it's like, no, they don't. And it takes you some time to realize that that's the case. But I think it was difficult for me because I would just say my opinion and people will think I'm rude, or they will think I am very straightforward, and they would not ask my opinion after that because they wouldn't like to hear it the way I would say it. So like for me, that example shows that yes, things can happen. Like people bring their own national culture for different things, the way they behave, the way they are raised, everything. And that is something difficult for both ways, because you can have a culture that is a culture based on the country you operate, but also you need to make sure that everyone, because you have people from different nationalities in your country as well, in your company as well. So you need to make sure how all this are filtered in a way. I found ways to change that and kind of like being like, okay, I'll find my happy medium, which is I will still say my opinion, but I'll find a different way to do that. And making sure that this is the culture. But for me, when someone comes and says, oh, you know, this is it, and be straightforward, I enjoy it. This part of me is like, great, I don't like that. I'm not sure how that much answering the question, but there's definitely an impact on national culture, on the company culture itself. I think it's for you to decide how far to take that, and being like, these are the things that we want to do as a business. Like, you know, if you're a business in the UK operating and you're very straightforward, that might not help you because this is not how the country operates. But also find the things that you need to do and the processes that you do need to do internally to make sure that everyone, whoever they're from, they can actually express themselves and bring value to the company, and they don't feel undermined, or they don't feel like, oh, my opinion is not welcomed here, so I'm not going to say anything, because you're losing out on that.
Yeah, I think I was asked a really good question actually, in terms of like national culture, bringing different cultures to cultures, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's it, isn't it?
But no, I think even across industries, it's hard as well. Like across, you know, from creative industries to more service like based industries, to then what I was talking about earlier about oil and gas industries. Like, you know, you kind of see that as well. Like, what can you bring from different? Like, I was very much like, you know, working hard. Like the company culture was very much like, you need to get the job done, like yes, regardless of what's happening. And then you move into another company culture and it's just like, oh, I can't take a full hour for my lunch. And it kind of applies to that as well in terms of the impact of different cultures across cultures as well.
Definitely.
Hope that's answered your question. We probably have time for a few more, so if you're wanting to pop in some last minute ones, and we still have about 5 minutes. But one of the things I was really interested in is we were talking about, you've implemented a 4-day working week. Yes. So, and you said that you kind of experimented with that. What are your kind of outcomes of that? How are you feeling? Like, are you going to keep this going on, or change things up a little bit?
So we've been doing that for many years. Like, I think I personally been working like this for 6 years now, 5-6 years now. So I don't work on Thursdays, except when I have when I enjoy conversations like this. But is for me, it's something that, like, we're doing this all these years because we feel it's working. And we've implemented in FutureX the moment we started. Like, everyone started with the same mentality that we don't work on Thursdays. We always got very positive feedback of that. Everyone was like, yes, because it was that alongside the feeling that it's about your quality of work rather than your quantity. So it kind of like people felt, yes, I can push forward, like I can be very productive, and then I can take a day off. What we recently found out is that people came to us and said, oh, I prefer Friday instead of Thursday. And then we had this conversation with the team, and like half people saying, I want Friday. Half people said, I want Thursday. And it was like, okay, now how do we solve this? And the thing we decided to do is like, let's try that out. So we said, you know, every Monday, everyone can say which days they're going to work on. From a leadership perspective, we have that quite set to make sure there is someone both days in case something goes wrong, or in case someone needs support. But in terms of the team, the rest of the team, everyone can choose where they're working. And what we got the feedback up to now is that everyone prefers that. And because they can choose kind of like, some people choose Thursday, like Friday, because they're like, yeah, I have a long weekend. Some people choose Thursday because they want this break in between. We've been doing that for like 2 months now. I still think there is probably more things to adapt as a business. Yes, it's working from them. I think for us, sometimes I feel that, you know, I always feel a bit, oh, everyone is working on Thursday and I'm not. So is there problems? Is there things that if I were there, it would be solved? Thursdays are like, Fridays are a bit more quiet. So suddenly you realize that your whole process needs to change to adapt that, how you plan for the week. to make sure that everyone has ownership of their own tasks, so they don't need someone else who's not working at the same time. So I still feel like we're adapting as a company to that. But I definitely feel it's something that we're going to keep doing. Like, I don't see us going. Also, when you have a team that has been working like this for like 4 years, I don't think you're going back to tell them now you're going to work for 5 days a week. And
Yeah.
it's the danger with company culture. Sometimes, like, even if it's not working, you're like, oh, now there's not a lot I can do, without everyone being like, no, bye. This is one of the reasons why I would stay. But for now, for us, it's been really successful.
That's great. And I guess that kind of thing is always adapting and changing, isn't it? Kind of moving with the times. So I think that's really interesting to hear, because you always hear people working on 4-day working weeks, and that's it, full stop. So it's really interesting to kind of hear about how that's impacted not only like your employees, but also like the leadership team and everything else. So yeah, cool. We probably have time for one last one. Are there any aspects of a culture you introduced that didn't work?
Oh yeah, probably. Probably a lot. The first thing that comes to mind, it was, and that's kind of like what I said that in the presentation, it was when I decided I will have a more friendly style leadership and I will be friends with my team. And it's kind of like this idea that we hang around together, and it's kind of like learn their situations and problems and be there for them, not only as a boss for the work and actually as a friend. And that didn't work. Completely. And for me, it was very interesting. That happened years and years ago, but it was interesting. The reason it didn't work is because they eventually wanted to leave and find a new opportunity. They had found an amazing opportunity, and they had turned down that opportunity because it would upset me. And because we're so close and friends, they were like, I thought that you'll be disappointed in me, and I thought it would upset you. And for me, that was devastating, because I was like, I want you, like, if there is an opportunity for you, for me, this is an emotional intense work. Like, I'll be upset because, oh, I have to find someone else and I like you and you're doing good work. But if you have an opportunity, which is your dream, you turning that down just because it might upset me as a person and as a friend, that was devastating. And I was like, no, we need to change that. And suddenly that was changed. So that's kind of like a bit at high level in terms of something that we tried and introduced and didn't work. There's probably a lot of things that we introduced. We introduced at some point breakfast every Monday morning together. And we said to people, you can come at 9, we'll bring breakfast, and then you will, like, we have a meeting on like 9:15. And then we made that, and then people will come, and it was kind of like interesting for a couple of days, like a couple of weeks. And then people were like, oh, I prefer to sleep for a bit more. Can I come later? And then suddenly we're like, okay, we'll make it optional. We'll be there for 9 for breakfast. If everyone wants to join. And then no one did. And we had a great breakfast. Everything left. And then we're like, okay, maybe that's not what they want. They don't feel they need to have breakfast all together. They probably need something else. For me, the most important thing is to be open and be like, I'll try that out. And then be like, okay, it's not working, so I'll just change it and I'll do something else.
It's really great to hear that you kind of are willing and open to kind of experimenting, because I feel like a lot of companies probably don't, or they're probably a bit worried of upsetting certain, like, the way that things are working so far. So I think it's really great to hear that, you know, you're open to that, and that you listen to your employees as well, rather than keeping the morning breakfast going when no one turns up, just because you're like, well, I've implemented it now, I can't not do it. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear. So cool. We ran over a little bit at 2 o'clock actually. I guess we're having too much fun.
I know. Well, I enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, we'll wrap up there. But I mean, if you have any more questions for Zoi, you can catch her on social media, I guess. You pop your social media handle up. And if you check out like CodeBase or CodeBase's social media as well, you'll see the handles tagged. But yeah, if everyone wants to join me for thank you to Zoi for that. It was really interesting and really insightful as well to hear from you and also your company. If you want to join in any of the other CodeBase events, you can hit up our website. It's www.thisiscodebase.com/event, a bit of a mouthful. But yeah, if you want to join in any other networking events that we've got, or keep an eye out for the next CodeBase on the Couch, it'll all be on there. So yeah, thank you so much everyone, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thank you.